the haunted inn. Nestled deep in the moors, where fog hung thick and shadows seemed to shift with a life of their own, stood the Ravenwood Inn. It was a place few dared to visit, shrouded in stories of curses and restless spirits. For decades, it had remained empty, its windows shattered and its walls draped in ivy. But the locals spoke of darker things, of figures shambling through the mist and the faint sound of groans carried on the wind. When adventurers or the desperate came seeking shelter, they often disappeared. Those who managed to stumble back to the nearest village came with tales of horrors beyond comprehension, of decaying hands clawing at doors and lifeless eyes staring from the dark. Sarah and her friends, Jake and Emily, were no strangers to ghost stories, and they thrived on adrenaline-fueled adventures. A weekend spent exploring the infamous Ravenwood Inn sounded like the perfect thrill. Armed with flashlights, a video camera, and an overnight bag, they made their way through the dense fog that clung to the moors. "You sure about this?" Jake asked, glancing nervously at the crumbling structure looming ahead. Sarah rolled her eyes. "What's the worst that could happen? It's just an old building." Emily shivered, clutching her flashlight. "The stories about zombies, you don't think they're real, do you?" Sarah laughed, though it sounded forced. "Zombies aren't real. Besides, it'll make for a great story to tell everyone back home." The inside of the inn was even more foreboding than its exterior. The air was damp and carried the stench of decay. Furniture lay scattered and broken, and the walls were scarred with deep gouges. As they ventured further, their footsteps echoed unnaturally, as if the inn itself was alive and listening. They found an old ledger at the front desk, its pages yellowed and brittle. The last entry was dated nearly a century ago, and the handwriting was shaky, as though written in a rush. "They are awake. The cursed will rise. Do not stay." Emily backed away, her eyes wide. "We should leave." "Not yet," Sarah said, her voice steady. "We've come this far. Let's check out the upper floors." The second floor was worse. The walls were covered in blackened stains, and the air was thick with an oppressive energy. As they turned down a corridor, Jake's flashlight caught movement. A figure shuffled toward them, its gait slow and unsteady. "Hey, you okay?" Jake called out. The figure stepped into the light, revealing its rotting face. Flesh hung from its jaw, and its milky eyes locked onto the group. It let out a low, guttural moan. Emily screamed, and the thing lunged. Chaos erupted. Sarah swung her flashlight, striking the creature across the head. It staggered but didn't fall. More sounds came from the corridor behind them, groans and shuffling footsteps. "Run!" Sarah yelled, pulling Emily and Jake toward the staircase. They raced down to the main floor, but the inn had come alive. Figures emerged from the shadows, their decayed bodies moving with unnatural purpose. The front door was blocked by 3 of them, their bony hands reaching out. "The kitchen!" Sarah shouted, leading the group through a side door. They barricaded it with a table, their breaths coming in ragged gasps. "What are we going to do?" Emily whispered, tears streaming down her face. Jake checked his backpack, pulling out a lighter. "If we can find something flammable, we can burn this place down." Sarah nodded. "The storage room. There might be something there." Dodging the undead, they made their way to the storage room. Inside, they found old cans of kerosene. Jake quickly doused the walls and furniture as Sarah and Emily kept watch. The creatures were relentless, their numbers growing with each passing moment. As the group retreated toward the exit, Jake lit the trail of kerosene. Flames roared to life, consuming the dry wood and spreading rapidly. The trio burst out into the open air, coughing as the smoke billowed behind them. They didn't stop running until they reached the edge of the moors. When they finally turned back, the Ravenwood Inn was engulfed in flames, the silhouettes of the undead writhing in the inferno. Days later, villagers reported that the fire had burned out, leaving nothing but ash. But some swore they saw movement in the ruins, shadows shambling through the wreckage, waiting for their next visitors. Sarah, Jake, and Emily never spoke of that night again, but they knew one thing for certain. The stories of the Ravenwood Inn were no mere legend.